This is a $650 driver. This is a $249 driver. If you bought the expensive one this year, here's what nobody at the counter told you. Both are bound by the same legal ceiling on performance, and that ceiling has a number you've never been shown. That number isn't a guess, and it isn't close. It's enforced by golf's own governing bodies, tested with a machine, not a guess from a club fitter, and once you know what it actually limits, the $650 sticker price starts looking like it's solving a problem that was already solved by law. It's called the coefficient of restitution, COR for short. It measures how much energy transfers from the club face to the ball at impact. The legal limit is 0.830. A driver face is not permitted to transfer more than 83% of the energy of the strike to the golf ball. Not most drivers, not the budget ones, every single one that's legally conforming, regardless of what it costs. This rule didn't appear out of nowhere. In 1998, the USGA noticed tour players hitting the ball noticeably farther and traced it to a new generation of titanium drivers with thinner, springier faces. They set a limit before running extensive independent testing of their own, and that original number, refined over the following decade, is the same number every driver on the market is still measured against. The panic is almost 3 decades old. The ceiling it produced hasn't moved since 2008. So when a brand tells you this year's face is hotter, faster, or more explosive off the tee, here's what that claim is actually bumping into. A fixed ceiling that was already there before the marketing copy was written. Not past 83%. That's the whole rule in one sentence. Here is what that ceiling actually produces on a launch monitor. MyGolfSpy ran their 2026 driver test with 42 models and 35 testers, each completing 14 separate testing appointments. Across all 42 drivers, flagship to budget, the carry distance spread was under 10 yards. 10 yards across 42 drivers, spanning a price range from under $400 to over $650. That is the first crack in the story. The second one explains why the price keeps climbing anyway, even after numbers like this get published every single year. There is a piece of this that does not show up on any launch monitor. It came from someone who used to set prices inside one of these companies, and what he said on the record explains exactly why the gap keeps getting sold. We will get to exactly what he said. To understand why that gap is so small in the first place, you have to look at the one test manufacturers can't market their way around. The USGA and R&A don't measure the coefficient of restitution directly anymore. They use something called characteristic time, or CT. A pendulum strikes the club face. The contact time is measured in microseconds. The limit is 239 microseconds, with a tolerance of 18 microseconds more. Cross that line, and the driver is non-conforming. It cannot be legally sold as tournament legal. It doesn't matter who made it, what it's called, or what it costs. The US version of this limit has been enforced since the early 2000s. The R&A matched it worldwide on January 1st, 2008, which is why every conforming driver on Earth, regardless of which side of the Atlantic it is sold on, has been bound by the same number for almost 2 decades. The test itself used to work differently. Manufacturers originally measured energy transfer by firing a ball out of an air cannon at the club face and comparing the speed before and after impact. That process took real setup time per club, which is part of why the pendulum-based CT test eventually replaced it as the standard. A pendulum swings into the face, the contact time gets logged in microseconds, and the test can run faster and more consistently than the old cannon method ever could. The replacement wasn't cosmetic. It made the test harder to game and easier to repeat, which is exactly why it's the number that matters here, not the one printed on a hang tag. The face is not the only part of the driver that golf's governing bodies put a hard number on. Clubhead size has been capped at 460 cubic centimeters since 2004, after driver heads grew from roughly 350 cubic centimeters to over 500 cubic centimeters in the space of just 3 years. Club length is capped at 46 inches. Distance, size, and length are all sitting under separate, specific ceilings, and every one of those ceilings was set before this year's release ever got designed. A driver isn't getting more legal room to perform than last year's model. It is getting a new shape inside a box that was already closed. Here's what that number is worth in real yards, so it stops being abstract. At a 100 miles per hour swing speed, every single increment of the coefficient of restitution is worth about 4.2 yards of carry distance. The entire legal range a manufacturer has to work with, from a bare titanium face to the legal maximum, accounts for roughly 21 yards total, and that's the full jump from decades-old steel-faced woods to today's titanium drivers, not the jump from 1 year's release to the next. Inside that already narrow legal window, the difference between this year's driver and last year's is a fraction of a fraction. This matters because of how driver comparisons usually get made. Most equipment reviews put a handful of golfers on a launch monitor, have them swing a dozen drivers, and average the results. That introduces a human variable into every single number. Swing speed drifts over a testing session. Strike location shifts as a tester gets tired. A heel strike on shot 4 and a center strike on shot 5 will produce two completely different readings from the exact same club. The characteristic time test removes the golfer entirely. A machine strikes the face, the same force, the same location, every single time. That's the only number in this conversation that isn't contaminated by who happened to be swinging that day. Inside the 42 driver spread, the value tier drivers did something the marketing departments would rather you didn't notice. 4 separate budget segment drivers finished inside the top 11 of the entire field for total distance. Not top 11 among budget drivers. Top 11 overall against every flagship release on the market. The Titleist GT2, retailing around $400, finished 11th overall and landed in the bottom 10 for only 3 of its 35 testers, the fewest poor finishes of any value tier driver tested. Its sibling, the GT3, now sitting at a discounted $449.99, ranked third best in the entire field for high swing speed distance. The Ping G430 Max 10K carried over completely unchanged from 2024 into 2025 and still ranked among the best performers that year. If new technology genuinely moved the needle every 12 months, a year-old unmodified driver wouldn't keep finishing near the top of a 42 driver field. The sub-70 859, priced at $399, got a direct line from MyGolfSpy's own testing team. At that price, it performs well enough, and if you're on a budget, it's worth considering. Worth being honest about the one exception. The Vice VGD01 Plus produced the strongest top-end distance of the entire value group, but it also showed some of the widest dispersion patterns in the whole field, meaning the distance came with real left-to-right inconsistency. That's a genuine trade-off, and it's the only one in this dataset. It's also not the trade-off the price gap is sold on. Nobody markets a $650 driver by promising tighter dispersion than a $249 one. They market it by promising more distance. And on distance, the $400 and $399 options are matching or beating the field. That's not innovation. That's a rounding error with a launch campaign. This isn't a one-year fluke either. A year earlier, in MyGolfSpy's 2025 test, the same pattern showed up from the other direction, in a tester's own words, published directly in the comments under the results. You can give up a couple yards of distance and get the most accurate driver of the bunch for about $250 less. 2 separate testing years, 2 separate driver lineups, the same conclusion landing both times. In 2023, TaylorMade released the Stealth 2 Plus. 2 years and 1 full model generation later, Callaway released the Elite Triple Diamond. According to the recorded testing data, the entire measurable difference between those two drivers, separated by 2 years of advertised innovation, was 2 miles per hour of ball speed. Total distance difference, under 5 yards. 2 years. 1 new face material. 1 new marketing campaign, 2 miles per hour. Distance is only half of this story. The other half is timing. Then someone who used to sit inside the pricing machine explained it plainly, on the record. Back in 2013, TaylorMade's entry-level driver, the RBZ Stage 2, had a street price of $300. That entry point does not exist anymore at any major manufacturer. Cobra's entry-level pricing climbed from $299 to $329 to $349 and now sits at $399. MyGolfSpy tracked this exact pattern across the industry's top 5 manufacturers, comparing launch prices going back to the fall of 2012, and found the same upward creep in every entry-tier model in that window. The $300 floor that used to define a beginner-friendly driver has simply stopped existing as a category. The coefficient of restitution ceiling has not moved since 2008. The prices moved. The ceiling stayed exactly where it was. There is a defense of this worth hearing out before dismissing it. The argument goes that fewer golfers are buying equipment overall, so manufacturers need higher margins per sale just to stay in business, and that the price increases reflect survival, not greed. That argument has real numbers behind it on the cost side too. Research and development, tour contracts, and materials all cost real money, and golf equipment companies are not posting the kind of profits that would suggest price gouging on a $1 billion revenue base. But that argument explains why prices might need to rise. It does not explain why the rise specifically targets the golfers who buy first, every January, before the test data on the model is even public. A survival strategy does not require a deliberate cascade aimed at early adopters. That part is a choice, not a necessity, and it is the part Rob Rigg described directly. So why does the price keep climbing toward a ceiling that has not? Here is the quote. Rob Rigg, who worked inside TaylorMade before founding his own golf brand, described the pricing logic he saw used there. In his words, it is easier to take money from early adopters and core golfers who pay up for new technology first, then discount and cascade the price down later while maintaining margin. Read that again slowly. The strategy is not to convince you the new driver performs better. The strategy is to charge the people who will pay full price before the data on last year's model or this year's model catches up to the marketing. The GT2 and GT3 results show exactly what that cascade looks like once it plays out. Buyers pay $650 in year 1. 18 months later, the same performance sells for $400 or less, and the early buyers have already paid the premium. That is not a guess about how this works. That is a named insider describing the mechanism from the inside, and it works because of who is actually buying. A small core of repeat golfers accounts for the overwhelming majority of equipment spending in this sport. Roughly 15% of golfers responsible for something close to 85% of total equipment spend. The annual cycle is not built to convince every golfer. It is built for the golfer who already wants to believe this year is finally different. There is a version of this conversation where forgiveness and distance get raised as the real differentiator, separate from distance. The CT test caps energy transfer at the face. It does not cap moment of inertia, MOI, the same way. The heel-to-toe MOI limit sits at 5,700 grams per centimeter squared, and drivers marketed at the legal maximum get branded 10K, meaning 10,000 units of resistance to twisting on off-center hits. That is a real, measurable difference, and it is the reason some drivers genuinely are more forgiving than others. But forgiveness is not what is printed on the box and is not what the annual release is sold on. The marketing promise is always distance. The regulatory ceiling caps exactly that promise for every conforming driver, regardless of price. The forgiveness argument is real. It is just not the argument being sold to you every January. There is another objection worth meeting directly. Get properly fit, and none of this matters. Fitting is real. The right shaft, lie angle, and loft for your swing will outperform the wrong combination in any driver at any price. But fitting changes the conditions the ball leaves the club face under. It does not touch the ceiling on how much energy that club face is legally allowed to transfer in the first place. A perfectly fit $249 driver and a perfectly fit $650 driver are both still capped at 83%. Fitting closes the gap between you and your own equipment. It does not reopen the gap between the equipment and the rule. 3 facts. Stack them. 1. Every conforming driver, regardless of price, is legally capped at the same energy transfer limit, measured by a machine with no swing variability, and that limit has held since 2008. 2. Independently tested across 42 models by 35 golfers over 14 appointments each, that legal ceiling produces a carry distance spread of under 10 yards with $400, $450, and $399 drivers matching or outperforming brand new flagship releases, and the same pattern holding up a year earlier in MyGolfSpy's 2025 test as well. 3. A named former pricing strategist has described on the record exactly how the annual price increase gets justified internally, and it is not performance. Same ceiling, same number, a $400 difference in price for a gap. MyGolfSpy measured at 10 yards across 42 drivers.